It's yet another busy week for the quadruple indicted Donald Trump and his not-so-merry band of indicted associates. Tomorrow in Fulton County, his former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, is scheduled to have an evidentiary hearing on his efforts to try and move his election interference charges to federal court. He also has a pending motion to dismiss his indictment altogether. Meanwhile, in D.C., Judge Tanya Chutkan will also be holding a hearing on setting a trial date in Trump's federal election interference case. For those keeping track, Trump's legal team is hoping to push back the trial all the way to April of 2026, while Jack Smith's office is calling for a January 2nd, 2024 trial date. Donald doing this legal dance while juggling a busy campaign schedule. And if you think the ex-president can count on guaranteed sympathy from the American people, well, think again. A new poll shows that most Americans, 3 in 5, say he should stand trial before the Republican primaries or the 2024 general election. Joining me now, Charles Coleman Jr., MSNBC legal analyst, civil rights attorney, and former Brooklyn prosecutor, and Christina Greer, associate professor of political science at Fordham University. And she's the author of Black Ethnics, Race, Immigration, and the Pursuit of the American Dream. My thanks to both of you for joining us this morning. The Trump stuff is important, and it's always going to be important for American democracy, but what happened in Jacksonville still really stays with me. And I know, Charles, you and I were talking about it in the break before we started. You're a civil rights attorney. You're also a former prosecutor, so you know there's a crime element to what just happened yesterday. But I want to talk about what happened yesterday briefly, and I am going to ask Christina the same thing. We were talking about how the mayor from Jacksonville said we have to be intentional about our words. And I think about that, right? Because I have the luxury of this platform and what I can say. But how do you not be honest about what happened? Charles, how do you not be honest about the fact that this white man drove 40 miles to target black people only?
Correct.
How do you reconcile those concepts?
That construct that you just described in terms of the inability or the resistance to honesty is exactly what got us here, Katie. Part of the problem is that we have allowed for false equivalencies to enter into this dialogue and create space that legitimizes hate, that legitimizes racism, that legitimizes all sorts of ideologies that are intended to infringe upon the humanity of people who look like me. And until we can be straightforward in our discussion and calling those things out, that's the part that requires intentionality, is the honesty about what you are trying to push in terms of denigrating me, my people, my community. That is not the same as me standing up and having pride in who I am. And the fact that we have gotten to this place is demonstrative of what it is that we need to move and do going forward in order to begin to reverse this cycle. Because unfortunately, for as long as we continue to try to politicize these conversations, it's going to continue to happen.
And it's going to result in actual action on racist thoughts.
That's correct.
It's going to become violence. Christina, you know, I really want to ask you the same question. It's the dehumanization for me, right? It's this idea that somebody can look at a group of people minding their own business, innocent victims shopping on a Saturday afternoon, but because of their skin color only, they can be targeted for death. What are your thoughts?
Well, Katie, my heart is very heavy. My grandparents lived just a few miles away from downtown Jacksonville in a tiny town called Yulee. Which it's a beautiful place with some of the most fantastic people ever. And I know that their hearts are heavy as well. I mean, Katie, here's the thing. All of these things are interconnected. You can't have an entire party denigrating racial groups day in and day out. We shouldn't be surprised that there's a swastika on his gun. We have long known that there is a direct link with people who are racist. And we keep saying racially motivated. It's racist. Racist actions and speech with anti-Semitism, anti-immigrant sentiments, anti-blackness. All these things are interconnected. We've got, a governor, Ron DeSantis, who does have blood on his hands because he is the one who is taking away education in the state to make sure people don't know Black history is American history, plain and simple. He is the one who's, said when the NAACP was like, it's not safe for Black people to be in Florida. He said that was just, essentially theatrics and they were making that up. All of these things that the Republican Party continue to perpetuate day in and day out about the others, the undeserving, people who don't believe, don't belong in this country, how they have to take back their country. Their supporters are listening, and we know that they're armed to the teeth, and they're taking it out on innocent people on a Saturday afternoon, living their lives, who deserve to be in this country. But we know that time and time again, too many white supremacists who hate Black people, who hate immigrants, who hate Asian Americans, Latinos, and also Jewish Americans it's all interconnected. And sadly, we're seeing consistently the results since we refuse to do anything about gun legislation in this country.
Charles, I'm not trying to be obtuse here, but let's talk about the civil rights, right? Because these poor people that were gunned down and murdered, they don't have civil rights anymore because they're dead. Right? How is it not a civil rights violation to have, almost the codification of the denigration of an entire group of people? How is that not taking away the ability for a citizen, but because they're black, suddenly now they don't have rights that are equal? Because there is a complete, almost like legal construct that's happening too, right? Because these laws are being passed. And if somebody violates them, people are like, well, it was a law. It was okay for me to do what I'm doing.
I think that that's part of the issue, but I think you have to look deeper at the entire legislative process and how policy is made. Take for a moment, Katie, a second and think about the contrast of this shooting yesterday and in Washington, a march that commemorated 60 years of our civil rights struggle in this country. And the fact that from a policy perspective, there have been incremental gains, but we are still from a perspective of individuals, understanding individuals, fighting the same fight. We are still having the same conversation. And where I'm going with this is that until we understand that you cannot legislate my humanity, we will continue to have this cycle. And that's why the conversation about our political discourse is so critically important. This is not just a policy discussion. This is not just a discussion about access. Civil rights is all of those things. Yes, that's correct. But at its core, civil rights is an affirmation of my humanity, your humanity, and everyone else's. And until we understand that and stop playing politics with it, we will continue to have this same fight that led us from 60 years ago to where we are now.
Which we don't even know about the progress anymore, considering what happened yesterday. And let's be clear, too, it's not just civil rights in a construct, in a theory.
Correct.
It's civil rights become laws.
In
we have
action.
voting rights acts that get gutted by a Supreme Court that actually undercut, and they don't allow for the enfranchisement of people.
And that reinforce racist ideology because now it legitimizes it because the Supreme Court of the United States said it's okay for us to do this. So this interconnectivity needs to be understood on all sides.
Christina, I want to go back to you on this. I mean, to your point that you made a few minutes ago, you have an entire party, not just a person, but you have an entire party that exists, that lives under this blanket of this privileged security that they can treat people like it's okay to be marginalized. It's okay that we're going to whitewash an entire history. Is that a solid political platform to run on? Does that work when you campaign with this idea? Because DeSantis, really, even though he's just shoving it down our throats in Florida, it's not really working if you look at the America as a whole polls.
No, not America as a whole, but Katie, we have to remember the primary voter is oftentimes very different from the general voter. And so this is why we see this racist rhetoric from so many Republican candidates, because they are, A, afraid of Donald Trump, the candidate, but they know that his supporters come out in droves during the primary. So they're trying to get past that first hurdle. And, to your point, the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, the Immigration Act, those are all interconnected, too. So when you sort of pull at the thread of one, you pull at the thread of all of them. And so Republicans are very well aware that for them to solidify their base, they need to go as extreme as possible, even though the data consistently tells us that most Americans, more than 2/3 of Americans, support a woman's right to choose. There's no sort of pro-life conversation. We're talking about choice or anti-choice, and most Americans support a woman's right to choose. Most Americans actually do want to have comprehensive immigration reform and figure things out, not just on a humanitarian level, but on an economic level. You would never know that listening to the Republican Party because they're catering to the most base level revisionist history, sort of separatist wing of the party that slowly but surely is encroaching in more and more across the country. But it's really incumbent upon us to stay strong to our values and really try and get those people who are wavering for economic reasons or whatever reason they may be wavering to help them understand that this is a larger project that the Republican Party has been working on for several decades to roll back all the important legislation and judicial rulings that have actually pushed us forward as a nation to help slowly but surely become more inclusive.
I want to apologize to the viewers that maybe wanted to have a Trump-centric conversation, but folks, Charles Coleman, Christina Greer, this is brilliance. That they can talk about everything and put it in a perspective that makes it count for you. So thank you, Charles, for being here, and Christina, thanks for spending the time with me. I appreciate it.